Welcome to another episode of Capturing the Intangibles. Coming off a bit of a break and diving into an interesting subject across consumer experiences and developing technology. Today we talk about the as-a-service revolution and why it's growing. Let us know your feedback. Finally, welcome back to another episode of Capturing the Intangibles. Mike, it's so good to see you. It's been, I don't even know how many weeks since we've done one of these. It's a little bit embarrassing, but just our schedules have been so nuts. And then we've got Massimo on his Italian sabbatical or whatever. What did you call it earlier?
Gap year?
He's on his gap year.
The year right after college.
Yeah, but he's enjoying his vacation down in Italy. But we wanted to get back together and have a good conversation and get the ball rolling. You're going to see the podcast start to take a little bit different shape and expanded form, hopefully as we progress here. But we're going to kick things off as we restart again. I had one thing on my mind when we started just looking back at some of the technology trends going on in 2021 today, right? And I believe one thing, Mike, you and I talked about last year that came out in a Forbes article that I believe they called the as-a-service revolution. And it's something still going on. I was just reading about it today in several tech articles about everything as a service and how much of a big deal it is and how great it is. So I thought we'd talk about that because it's something we come across in our daily conversations, both internal to our development teams, but also with customers. And we have differences of opinions depending on what type of customers that we talk to. But let's talk on the pure technologist side first about this as a service revolution. And clearly, it's something really good for us, right? As development team members, where you've got this abundance of cloud services that now you can figure out how you can develop against it and grab this service ad hoc to say, how can I complete this project? Whether it be big data and analytics, AI, does not matter, right? Advanced integration. You've got plethora of services that are, metered, but you can go off and start to develop against that. It's as true as a service, cloud services. And quite frankly, it's easy for many to build against, right? But what are your thoughts on, as a pure technologist point of view, about this as a service revolution?
Well, I think you also kind of have to take stock of where we've been for the last long while here, right? So that Forbes article, when it came out, it was anticipating that there's this giant sea change of how people were working. No one's in offices, right? So everyone has to get the same amount or more work done from the comfort of their own home. And so I think there was a huge emphasis on productivity tools and also software that makes people's lives much, much easier to do the same things that they were doing in the office, but that much better. And I think from a product perspective, for me personally, it's exciting because the focus is on how do we take this really complex, esoteric, or time-intensive process, compartmentalize that down and actually wrap a nice UI around it and wrap a nice experience and a workflow around it and turn something that was basically like a drain on productivity and turn it into a really powerful experience. And so we're still continuing to see this, right? We've got the Delta variant now for COVID. Now we've been doing the podcast as a service, by the way, for right. More than a year, right? So it's not just a service. We also have, a producer in the background here who's tremendously helpful here. But yeah, I think it's, full throttle. We're only just accelerating over here. And we're starting to see that, now this is starting to bleed into other areas and facets of our life as well. We were talking a little bit about this a little earlier, this emphasis on digitalization of even material goods is starting to open up doorways to even making things around us serviceable in sort of a software SaaS type concept over here. So it's bit by bit, but we're seeing that this is only starting to accelerate more and more, and beyond just simply conventional productivity tools and office tools. It's really the future of what our lives look like too.
Yeah, it's certainly not just, a pure technology service availability type thing. It's really a consumer model that you're seeing everywhere. One thing that you said earlier that was interesting to me, do you think, and when we talk about cloud services, we talk about, the S3 type services, the Lex or Alexa type services that we're accustomed to using and starting to embed in a lot of our product offerings. But you said something earlier about the focus on experience. Do you think that that's the main advantage, is that now we can really focus on making it easier to use? Or what are those advantages, and is it primarily around experience?
You know what? I think even more than just experience, because I think experience is delivery. I think it comes down to actually convenience, right? Mm-hmm. So it's delivering convenience. The experience is how you consume that, and that makes it much more competitive. One vendor or one product or one workflow over another. But if you look at like conventional how you run a business, order to cash, for example, if you can actually put a lot of, we talked a lot about, RPA, the pitfalls of it, as well as the sort of promised land benefits of it. But if you start to like put these technologies together, I mean, is it really that ridiculous to think that sometime in the future, there's really just going to be finance as a service modules, order entry as a service module, where actually you have this fully automated process with AI, with chatbots. I know you hate those too. So, we're starting off strong with all the things that you disdain with our first summer episode back in full swing here. But, when you start to look at these really complex and esoteric processes, delivering convenience and freeing up people to work on other things, or at least no longer have to focus as much attention on it, people are willing to pay money for that. And increasingly, I think the as a service moniker correlates very strongly to delivering that experience, and making that fun to use, having like really, really cool, powerful commercials about how awesome my day is. I see it constantly on things like Grammarly. I was watching a YouTube video, and you have Grammarly that is actually correcting your grammar, your spelling, your punctuation, how you're constructing sentences for improved readability. And I'm looking at the actress that's like texting on her phone as Grammarly is making adjustments, and she's having a fantastic little time. But, it's about the experience. At the end of the day, it's just improving your language and your communication, but she's having a wonderful time using this wonderful service that you can pay a monthly subscription to. And I think very much, it is one and the same, where it's at least converging towards that direction here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic example. And now I'm going to come back with an even more, the exact opposite, almost at this point to us, like an even boring subject, which is why cloud? Everything that you were talking about right then and there, it's like when you think about these cloud services available at your disposal, and it allows you to spend more time on experience, and it's the TCO and convenience of being able to connect those and not worry about the overhead, it's helping to paint the picture of why cloud is so valuable. It's not just that you are managing things in cloud. No, you've got so many aspects, whether it's total cost of ownership, whether it's experience, whether it's new platforms to execute against a problem that may be $1 million savings per year, an AI problem. Those are the types of valuable things that people are starting to consider in their transition to cloud. And I'm fascinated with how that fits into this. But I want to talk a little bit about the commercial aspect. We always like to compare, you started to allude to this, but we like to compare the differences or the synergies between what we see happening in the commercial space versus what I'm going to call the development space. Yes, the consumer space, yes. But we're seeing everything as a service. Even when we revisited this Forbes article, it's all about Zoom, right? We're coming out of this. Well, are we coming out of this COVID time? I don't know, but everyone Zoom took over the world, right? And that as a service availability is a great model of how this was successful during this time and how things are going to continue that way. But it's things we're accustomed to, streaming, clothing services. We're not just talking about the technologies itself. It's the actual business models, right, that are changing to as a service, even though they're going to have technology aspects behind it. But there's something firm here that companies are really taking a hold of. But I'm curious your perspective on the commercial side. Any other interesting examples from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think you see the emergence of this, and don't get me wrong, I'm going to do a little bit of fair speculation here, but we were chatting a little earlier about I don't have this problem, right? I live in a condo building, and anytime I have a problem, I don't know if you ever heard the Mitch Hedberg joke, but anytime I have a problem, I go to the apartment store where we all just stand around doing nothing. I'll keep it clean for the podcast. But you've got a nice property, and you have fix them up projects and DIY things that you have to do, which means that you're either going to Home Depot, Ace, or Lowe's on the weekend. Probably more weekends than not, I'm guessing, as a homeowner. Yep. And so there was an interesting article that just came out about how Home Depot is now going to inactivate, or rather, I guess, the power tools that they have on inventory on hand will be inactive until they are activated at purchase, right? So these are effectively useless tools. You cannot use them for all practical intents and purposes here. However, the second that someone purchases this, then this tool can be activated and actually used, so a power drill or something of that sort. And you start to look at this and you start to squint and you start to wonder, okay, well, what about things like right to repair? What about things like, selling a product like this to somebody else? And you start to think about, is the trajectory taking us down a path where even things like material goods, power drills, power tools, are these going to become service-oriented artifacts that in order to use this, if you want to use this drill, then you actually get maintenance notifications. If you look at, for example, your HP printers now, it sends you a notification saying that you need to renew or pay a subscription for like inkwells and everything like that to be delivered. There's a convergence between those two experiences, this sort of software experience and this hardware experience, the physical world, where I think now we're starting to see that, companies, vendors, and others are starting to drive this sort of as a service approach into things that we never would have ever thought of. And I'll give you one more example. I know it's a long run-on sentence, but I literally just saw this, didn't even have a chance to tell anyone about this, but I've been walking throughout the city with my dogs, and I was peeking into a CVS, and I noticed that all the, the refrigerators that they have with like Powerade, Gatorade, water, all of that stuff. Well, you expect usually a glass window, right? You can actually just see what drinks that they have available in there. I just saw that some CVSs, I think it was CVS, started actually installing TV screens that have just pictures of the drinks that are on the shelf behind it. So you can't actually see through the window, but it's telling you the price. It's showing you exactly what that soft drink is or what that product is. And it got me thinking, like, this is like inventory as a service almost. Like the entire thing just takes care of itself. It knows when it's running low on drinks. It knows when to restock. It knows when to order all of this stuff. So as a convenience store manager or as a CVS manager, all of the process of doing inventory every single night to determine what's going to be shipped on a truck the next day and so on, that experience is completely consolidated. And this is on to the benefit of the store owner. But, the experience to me as a consumer, as someone walking by or walking into a CVS, is now I'm even actually seeing TV screens to look at the drinks that are available to me. And it's only a matter of time, I think, that you start to even see things like ads on top of those, oh, this is going to be the thirst quencher that you want to get, and they're going to be vying for your attention and so on. So like you see this service thing, and there's a strong correlation with ads, but you see this service experience precipitating and like permeating all parts of our lives, and we don't even necessarily recognize it because we become so accustomed to it, right?
Right.
What about you? Any experiences, or what do you think about the Home Depot thing?
I'm so fixated on that right now because I've seen the exact same things happening. Like, do you start to think about, okay, does the entry price for material goods start to come down because they want to capture your business based on consumption, right? So whether we're talking about technology services or material goods, it's so interesting that everything's moving towards consumption. However, if I'm going to buy a $100 drill, right? To me, that's a good investment because I may use it a lot, right? So the more I use it, the lower my TCO because I'm getting more value out of it. Whereas someone else that uses it and may only use it, once a month, who's to say that these models don't change to, okay, we're gonna charge you for every project, 1 hour project that you're using this for, right? How many times you have to recharge your batteries, right? It changes the entire commercial perspective of how I evaluate a purchase. And it's so fascinating to me, right? And I do agree with you. I think everything is heading that direction. I'm a little bit confused on the vending machine model as to, well, why have the screen there of showing the picture behind it? Just, you can still do the same automation, but just show the drink because, hey, I want to see it falling down. I want to make sure it's not getting hung, but neither here nor there. But
not even vending machines, man. It's just the doors that you open at a CVS or a gas station to like pull out a drink and everything like that. And they said, you know what? Glass is good, but we can do better. Let's put TVs everywhere.
All right. Yeah. So maybe that's just taking it to the extreme, or maybe that's just me being lame. I don't know. But I do want to bring this back to sort of the enterprise space too. It's no different here. I think we've got customers and prospects that we talk to all the time of how does this apply to enterprise space? Because we've got a lot of RFIs that come across to where it's can you do X, Y, and Z, or can you integrate with this service, or can we do this ourselves and put that into your environment? And the conflicting story we constantly hear is that some are really into having cloud services at their disposal and be able to integrate and do things themselves because they've got a large development presence, whatever it may be. And then we've got the other side that still, in my opinion, tends to be a little bit bigger, which is I need something that's completely turnkey, right? So those sort of, to a certain degree, conflict with one another. So how do we navigate those sort of things? Do you sit on one side or the other, or what do you see in the field?
Well, imagine that you're a CIO, right? Like, or think about when we graduated college. I started actually at like a IT help desk. And back then, this is not that long ago, but, this is now, 12 years ago when I first started. The teams that I was working with, we had IT networking guys, we had Exchange professionals, and they knew everything from like the servers that Exchange was running on to like how to manage the entire operation for email. So you have all these specialists and people that manage all these parts of the organization. They exist because of capital budgets, right? As an organization, we need to invest in productivity software and suites. And so X% of our capital budget for the year is going to be dedicated towards investing in like things like Exchange services and servers. That was 10, 15 years ago.
Yep.
Nowadays, there's no such thing, right? Yes, you do have specialists that specialize in Exchange management, but there's no longer that intersection of having to manage the deployment, the backups, the servers. It is hyper focused on the service itself of delivering email, to the point that now it's actually more of almost like an analyst type role, managing a lot of that. I hope I don't get any hate from any Exchange administrators out there, right? But very much so. Again, it comes down to convenience, doesn't it? So if you think about this from the role of a CIO, I've got a limited amount of budget and I need to maximize the outcome and the outputs of that money, and looking at the opportunity costs. I need to look at the very real opportunity in front of me with servicing or providing everything as a service. And instead of rolling out, a huge portion of my budget to invest in one discrete, let's say, outcome, actually take that same amount of money and invest in services to help drive productivity higher and wider throughout the organization. So, I mean, that's a really, really compelling value proposition if you're in charge of budgets at the end of the year. How do we get the most impact or how do we stretch a dollar, right? And services is a really effective way to do that, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think what it does allow us to do is put more emphasis on just the end result, not necessarily the how. And I know we're getting into the granular depths of what each cloud service can provide, but I'm going to play a little bit of an antagonist viewpoint on this, in that, even though we have all these different options at our disposal, and I'm talking from development side, right? We've got all these different options on how to build certain things. Our customers have the exact same viewpoint or exact same ability on that, but there is a TCO aspect to being able to basically package these things together. So at what point is it too big or is it too small? And is there not a right answer, because customers have different opinions on that? But the easier that you can make it to connect these things together and lower your TCO means you have less debate with your finance directors on, hey, we should do this project for this end result. And oh, by the way, I can deliver faster because I've got these cloud services interconnected together in a way to focus on the end result, not necessarily the development of that result, right? So that's where I think we kind of see that. And I think our group as a whole takes the perspective of, hey, yeah, we do need all these services defined to sort of a micro level. But at the same time, the synergies that you get by making sure that those are interconnected to create bigger experiences ad hoc or on the go is fundamentally needed. And I do think that's maybe a gap in the market that we're ultimately trying to address. But I don't know. What's your perspective on like the TCO aspect of all of this? Are there opportunities to continue to make this better?
Yeah, I mean, you said antagonistic, but I actually think we're talking, one side of the coin each here, because I went the boring finance route, right? You got a budget, you got to figure out how to make it the most of it, but you're going the innovation route, which I think is a lot more exciting and enthusiastic. It sounded like you're talking about more from the vendor perspective, right? So like what
Yes.
we're building and how do we actually drive innovation? Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. If nothing else, the R&D that we inherit from a managed service, when you think about how many man hours were actually invested into delivering anything from like Amazon's Athena or Azure Blob Storage or any of that sort of thing, the actual IP and R&D, let alone the actual like hardware costs associated with that, who's got the time? Like, ain't nobody got time for that, right? And to actually just have that available to us as a service and actually just spin up a an instance, a cluster, or reserve some storage or whatever like that, and actually start getting to the implementation cycle or the design. Yeah, absolutely, I'm in full agreement with you. I mean,
Yep.
customers today directly are able to benefit from that, but as a vendor, building out scalable cloud services where we're servicing thousands and thousands of customers on the same hardware, I don't actually even see how it's feasible to do it otherwise. And that's a wink, wink, because I know some other people try and do that. It's damn hard.
Right. Yeah, and it's it's a fascinating area. And when I was talking more about the antagonistic, it's more about this fascination with everything as a service that's not going anywhere. But when you look at vendors like AWS, who we've taken a lot of good things from, right? Like we've saved a lot in terms of development overhead, but the Google, the Azures, those types of providers out there. At the same time, when we're doing that connectivity of service to get to an end result, we're passing those on to our customers, right? That's why, that we've talked about, I believe, before, working with our friends over at Constellation, how the savings of being able to triage different things together on behalf of the customer only serves to give a greater TCO in these types of investments. So that's really what I was getting at, is it that every consumer out there needs to be looking at these services at a micro level, or do they need to be looking at them more holistically as a complete solution? And I think that debate's going to continue to exist, and there's good and bad for both, perhaps.
Oh, I completely understand. I think, you can see pro-consumer, anti-consumer in some of those cases, or to what benefit does anyone stand to gain with that sort of thing. I don't know if we're necessarily going to arrive at a conclusion today on that one, man.
No, absolutely not. But Mike, I really enjoyed the conversation today. I'm glad we could get back into it. We'll hopefully have Mossimo back next week and going to get into some new exciting topics. But until next week, Mike, we'll see you next time.
Yeah. See you in progress.